More than you would expect for a failing dam.
Well, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Might as well be here.
Good call.
Welcome to the March Community Development Committee meeting. We'll do roll call.
Present.
Dan Hansen,
Here.
Ryan Shirley,
Present.
Jerry Van Someren,
Here.
Dick Hesselink,
Here.
and Scott Counter is excused.
That's right. Let's go into public comment, and we have several. We'll start with Jason Erickson.
Hi, my name is Jason Erickson. I live at 1465 24th Street at present. So we were here a couple of weeks ago regarding an address change that's being proposed. So it's agenda item number 4 on our list this evening. Short story is we've got a development that went in late 80s, early 90s. There was 2 houses that came off a little stub road, and it's always been 24th Street. Since then, 24th Street came off of 35 and 64. It was then moved over to 150th for the highway to come through. Still remained 24th Street. Now you fast forward to 2022. Mr. O'Brien, who has now sold some of his land, he put a cul-de-sac in 4 lots. And the problem is that there's not enough house numbers as you head north to have a consecutive series of numbers, because the other houses that have been there for 20 to 25 years. There's been all these opportunities for the county or the town to get this right, and now the burden is being placed on us. The Toomeys have stonework on their home and at the end of their driveway. I don't have so much that, but I've got like 50 line items of things that I need to fix, everything including my will and trust, which is going to cost money. So I'm very curious of how we can get this far and we don't have an ordinance. So it sounds like that's what number 4 is about. But I'm just still asking the community to consider, options, 1, and 2, how did we get this far in life? And then is there other developments that I know there is that have roads that all disconnect and branch off, and they're still their same street? So are the rest of these residents being burdened with this as well? And it's just what it is. It's just a burden. How could this cul-de-sac be approved to be built without this figured out? That should have been a major item that would have need to get figured out before that thing was approved, at least from the town. I would assume the county. So at some point I'm looking for a reflection of how did this get screwed up? How did this get 25 years of mistakes that keep going and going and going? So that's my comment. The other comment is Ken over here. This entire process of announcing to us that our address could potentially be changed has been a complete disaster. This guy over here is the only guy that has had consistent communication. He's followed up on every single promise. So Ken, thanks for that. But from the get-go, this has been a complete mess. No callbacks, no email backs. Ken's the only guy so far that has consistently done exactly what he said. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Jason. Corey Toomey.
All right, so I think Jason laid it out pretty well. I'm here for the exact same reason. We're 1467 24th Street. I'll second Ken, thank you for your time and your emails and information. I'll just add that our conversations that we've had with the board members are a little bit different, right? I think there's some disconnect between the town board members and the county as far as their ideas for resolution and some of the things that they're proposing. It seems like there's kind of a disconnect. So in our conversations with several from the county, there's some times where I feel like I'm trying to pry out information to see if the board members in the county are aligned, but either I'm being led to make believe that there is that big of a disconnect and you guys are fully unaware of what some of those proposed ideas are, or you're aware and you're working on them. But either way, I just wanted to point that out. But we do still oppose the address change. We want to remain 24th Street. I want to keep my address of 1467. To Jason's point, the stonework on the house, the stonework at the pillar at the end of my driveway that says 1467. I have a seasonal mailbox that gets put up every single year. I had custom made with 1467. I don't want to lose those things or have to go back and do major construction on my home in the pillars to change my address. So just a lot of things going on, but I think, yeah, that's all I got. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. Laura Toomey.
I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but I'm willing to. So I also live at 1467 24th Street. I just want to echo everything that Corey and Jason have already shared. And then I just also want to add that there's been a lot of frustration with the way that this project has been implemented. Specifically, one example I can give you is that the address change was pushed through to the Postal Service as well as emergency services before we even had a new street sign installed. So that's been a big frustration for us. And then we also continue to be frustrated that the county is not willing to be accountable for this error that was made several years back. And there is still no plan in place to reimburse us for any of these costs, like replacing the stonework on our home or replacing our custom mailbox. So this just continues to be a source of frustration for us, and we have a lot of time and energy spent into this already. And we're already seeing negative impacts of this change, so we do hope that we're able to come to a resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Is there anybody else who would like to speak during public comment? Seeing none, thank you. I'll begin the public hearing, ordinance amending the comprehensive zoning ordinance in the town of Star Prairie for Moulton. And we'll start with a staff report by John.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. The first item on your agenda tonight is a public hearing for a rezoning application by the Moulton Living Trust, represented by Tim Moulton in the town of Star Prairie. Specifically, the address is 1970 Nighthawk Drive. The area in question is 42 acres, and the applicant desires to rezone from R1 to R2. A little bit of an explanation: in the St. Croix County zoning ordinance, R1 represents most agricultural uses that are allowed. It also limits density for residential development at 1 dwelling unit per 10 acres. Under the proposed R2 district that the applicant seeks, most ag uses are continued to be allowed. However, the R2 district does allow major subdivisions, which are defined as 5 or more lots in one plat. The minimum lot size for a residential lot in the town of Star Prairie is 2 acres, and the request is consistent with Chapter 15.545 of the County Zoning Code. A few aerial photos and maps to give you some general orientation of the site. You see the site highlighted in blue. To the left, you see the village of Somerset linked by Highway 64 going east to the city of New Richmond. This site is about 1.5 miles north of Highway 64 and just south of County C that bisects the town of Star Prairie. Next, we zoom in a little bit. We have an aerial photo showing Nighthawk Drive at the top of the site, the Apple River bordering the site on the south. And then you'll see a couple parallel lines if you follow my arrow. These delineate the floodplain and wetland boundaries of the site. And from Nighthawk Drive to the south to Apple River, the site generally drops about 40 feet in elevation. And again, just panning out a little bit further to show some adjacent development, we have some rural residential development to the west and some larger single-family lot development to the north, and again, the Apple River to the south. Taking a look at some of the general features of the property, again, the property subject to the rezoning is highlighted in blue. Areas to the north, west, and east are currently zoned R2, and the subject property and some land just to the south is currently zoned R1. Next, we take a look at the jurisdiction's comprehensive plans. In accordance with state statute, rezoning applications must be consistent with the local jurisdiction's comprehensive plan, which is a document that portrays the vision of the town's future through maps and policy statements. You'll see the general area of the property at the tip of the red arrow. According to the Town of Star Prairie Comprehensive Plan, they guide this property for future rural residential and open space. And some of the applicable policies within the comprehensive plan document talks about the rural residential district, including traditional and new major subdivisions. It talks about supporting new development that are primarily single-family and two-family homes. And it also talks about the area of town south of County C, which transitions into 210th Avenue, that these should be the first areas developed and where the town should encourage development to locate. And the subject property meets that criteria. Again, we're just south of County C. According to the St. Croix County Comprehensive Plan, the future land use plan of the county also designates this parcel as residential with some open space following and adjacent to the Apple River. Under the St. Croix County designation, residential is a designation to identify areas that are suitable for future residential development with a preferred housing density in this area of 1 unit per 2 acres, which is the minimum lot size requirement in the town of Star Prairie. The primary intent of the open space designation is to identify areas suitable for open space and outdoor recreation. These sites can include U.S. Fish and Wildlife, DNR, and National Park Service properties, in addition to areas of wetlands, shorelands, and floodplains, which occupy this property. Next, we'll take a quick look at some natural resource features. You'll see the southern portion of the site identified as an environmental corridor. And again, these correspond to the wetland and floodplain areas adjacent to the Apple River. Next, we take a look at some different maps that show the applicable shoreland areas, which are everything highlighted in green and adjacent to the river. We also have the large allocation of the floodplain as well as scattered wetlands. Based on the county code, our shoreland areas are regulated through Chapter 16. And Chapter 16 establishes setbacks, impervious area limits, land disturbance limits, buffer vegetation, and lot size requirements. And then the county also has Chapter 18 floodplain, which regulates the use of property within the designated floodplains based on flooding potential. Next, we take a look at some other categories that show up on our natural resource map. This map shows areas with slopes of 12 to 20% and slopes in excess of 20%. As I mentioned earlier, we have a drop in elevation from Nighthawk Drive south to the Apple River. So many of the building pads that will be proposed will be on the very northerly part of these sites. County code prohibits any development on slopes in excess of 25% and has some stringent requirements for slopes that are impacted in the 12 to 20% range. And these items will be reviewed during the land division process, which is not part of your approval tonight. Next, we take a look at the governmental agency review. So recently, the town board of Star Prairie met, and they do recommend approval of the rezoning application. They took action on March 7th. Next, we just take a look at some general policies within the county comp plan that talks about guiding rural development to locations that do not convert productive ag land, providing a balance of uses throughout the county, and development being consistent with the character of the surrounding neighborhood and terrain. Next, we take a look at the plan being able to be consistent with the natural resource management plan in Chapter 15 zoning. We also have criteria that the committee can look at as far as approving the rezoning or recommending approval and having it be consistent with the comprehensive plan, the natural resource management plan, and the county zoning ordinance, again, that has regulations that limit and regulate impacts to floodplains and shoreland areas as well as steep slopes. Other criteria that the committee considers that the town has not disapproved the rezoning request and that the proposed use is consistent with surrounding districts and does not result in spot zoning, and that the rezoning be consistent with surrounding land uses. So before the committee tonight, you have 3 actions you could take. You could recommend approval of the zoning amendment, recommend disapproval, or table the request for additional information. And then finally, to summarize, staff reviews the application request and we compare it to the comprehensive plans of the town and the county. And based on our review, from a staff level, we are recommending approval to the committee of the rezoning amendment to the R2 district based on the following findings. Based on the technical review findings of 1 through 5 above, and consistency with the county comp plan and county natural resource management plan, that the future land use plan maps that we just reviewed and the future land use category descriptions that we reviewed with you within the comp plans do support the rezoning request to R2 residential. Another finding is that the Town of Star Prairie Town Board has recommended approval of the request and that the proposed use is consistent with and can comply with standards in Chapter 15 zoning. That completes the staff overview of the request.
Thanks, John.
Yep.
Are there any supervisors who have a question for John Hilgers? No. Well, we still have a public hearing open. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak in favor of this rezoning? Is there any member of the public who would like to speak in opposition to this rezoning? That being the case, I will close this public hearing and we'll move into one item that I forgot to do early on in the meeting. We need to approve the minutes before I go into the business items. Everybody's had a chance to review the minutes. Did anybody have any questions or additions to the minutes? Okay, the minutes stand approved. That's done. We'll move into the business items. The first being amending comprehensive zoning ordinance section 29, township 31N, range 18 west, town of Star Prairie, rezoning 42 acres from R1 residential zoning district to R2 residential zoning district. Do we have a motion? We have a motion. We have a second. We have a second. Moved by Jerry, seconded by Ryan. And any conversation, any discussion, questions? Seeing none, let's put it to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 2, consideration of a countywide compost and recycling service. And I would invite Noah and his honor to come on up to the table. This is Noah Wiedenfeld, and we have Jim Zukowski, who's the mayor of New Richmond. I had invited them to come up to the table and help us with a conversation regarding this. We received a letter, which is in the packet, from Jim. I suppose you've all had a chance to review that. And Jim, would you go ahead and start, or Ellen, would you like to have a few words?
No.
No,
go ahead.
not yet. Go ahead. Jim, start us out with your... Go ahead and use the microphone. No, you have to push a button. There you go.
All there?
Yeah.
This started after we closed our compost site here in New Richmond. It was an open compost site for probably 30 years, and everybody was utilizing it in the whole county. People from Minnesota are coming over because it was the only site in all of St. Croix County that was open for people to come. Well, the problem was that we were getting from businesses, we were getting big logs, everything there. And finally, we decided, because of our cost for that, we shut it down just to local residents 2 days a week. And then I talked to, I think, 4 supervisors in the spring, I believe it was. And I just want to know if there's a possibility of looking at a central site for St. Croix County for composting and recycling. Recycling is going to be a big deal with the fastest growing county in Wisconsin right now, I believe. and we keep on growing. We're probably about 100,000 people now, and people don't have this resource. I see that you have one day a week for recycling at a site, and cars are lined up a half a mile for that. But it's
One day a year
1 day a year.
for the clean sweep.
Yeah, 1 day a year, and actually it used to be 2, now it's cut back to 1 day a year. What we'd like to see is just looking into this, if it's possible that we can do something to look at a central site for recycling and composting both. The central site would be for electronics, people have refrigerators, stoves, other things. More and more, we're finding these things in the ditches around us, and we think there's a problem. The county is the responsible unit for this, and you're supposed to be working with other government entities in the county. And what we're asking today is, we're not asking for money, we're not asking for action. What we're looking at is there a way of doing it? And other ways financially, besides the county raising their levy, are there other ways of doing it? And looking at, like I said, a possible central site for the whole county. And that's why we're here today, and I think Noah has a few more things to say here.
Yeah, I think even, outside of yard waste and compost and the mayor mentioned, electronics, I think there's been a lot of improvements over the years in terms of collecting medical waste, our drug take-back program at the police stations. So I think even, beyond, while our conversation started with looking at compost, but as the county population continues to grow, we know there will continue to be more waste of all different types, and it's going to require more collaboration between the various municipalities. And are there opportunities to have shared contracts when it comes to bidding things out? Are there opportunities, even just for greater economies of scale, where right now it's, New Richmond residents kind of have their thing, River Falls residents, they all kind of have their own days of the week and their own processes. And kind of comes in the timing of, even for New Richmond this year, we have a 5-year curbside recycling contract that's up for bid at the end of this year. And for us, before we bid that out, to say, let's look holistically and what should that contract for services include. And so I think, beyond just yard waste and, where do people take their Christmas tree if they don't live in New Richmond, just really kind of what are opportunities for collaboration, and is there even kind of some low-hanging fruit? And I know the mayor and I had looked at the county solid waste and recycling management plan. It was approved about 4.5 years ago, and does it make sense to have maybe a small working group with some members of the various municipalities to say, let's take a look at this and what are some goals that we can work towards to make a more of an action plan. We don't want it to be a plan that, okay, we did it and kind of sits on a shelf, and 10 years from now we look at it again. But to say, are there some little things that we can do to say, hey, the town of Richmond and the city of New Richmond are going to work together on X, Y, Z, and maybe the county just kind of helps facilitate some of that. So we don't really know what the answer is, but really just wanted to see if it's something that county board members would see value in looking at. And again, it's not today, tomorrow, next week, but something that each year we kind of pick away at some of these things and hopefully find some common ground.
And the other thing too is that Noah has talked to the city administrators in Hudson and River Falls, and he's talked to the town chairs in Richmond and Star Prairie townships, and they want to look into this. Like I say again, they want to look into it. We're making no commitments for the county, no commitments for anybody else. Just, we would like to maybe, I don't know if it'd be your committee or just a subcommittee, one or the other, let's sit down and just look at ways this could possibly happen. And at the end of the day, maybe it can happen, but we're, like I say, we're the fastest growing county in the state. We're leaders in this state for environment. Everybody wants a better environment. We even had in Richmond last week, we found oil going in the Willow River through the sewer system somehow. So somebody was dumping their oil in there. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but they're thinking, how do I get rid of this? So they put it in the sewer system. It went in the Willow River. We don't want to see this kind of stuff. And like I said before, people are putting their appliances, things are going in the ditches. We get complaints about that all the time, but It's not us, it's in the townships around us it's happening. So what we're just asking for a little collaboration, let's look into it and see what we can do for all of St. Croix County. We are the best county in the state of Wisconsin. Let's keep it that way.
I really appreciate your leadership in bringing it up and coming to drag us into a conversation that we didn't want to have. It's uncomfortable because obviously we, are always struggling for the next $10,000, which is real money for taxpayers. And I'd turn to the committee and ask you to join the conversation and say, would you be willing to continue a conversation looking for a solution, a broader solution? My friend Dave Green was over at my house the other day, and he's telling me that somebody threw an old washing machine in the ditch in front of his house. He's a guy with the VFW that we all know. It's crazy that people just think it's okay to drive out in the township and throw something in the ditch. It happens all the time. Would you be willing to continue a conversation and ask staff to put together some big numbers, that we can look at and say, well, maybe we can continue a conversation and look at a way to collaborate and not pay for, what kind of grants perhaps could we look at? Thoughts?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the county has like a suggested places to go for some of this stuff on the website. And I know that's not everybody is going to go searching for it, I guess. I understand that. And I also want to live in I don't want to see fridges on the side of the road. I don't want the county to become that, for sure. So I don't know that there's no reason to not continue the conversation, I guess.
I think a conversation is a good thing to have, but it's like you said, Jim, we don't know where it's going to go, and we wouldn't either. So either this committee or a subcommittee of this committee, perhaps meet with you people or other people who are involved, who are interested in it. We have a big county and a diverse county, and like we've heard already, money is a big issue. So it'd be interesting to find what we can do by working together.
Yeah, I think it's worth talking about. It's worth meeting and trying to figure something out. We've had this discussion before about clean sweep, and those costs keep rising for us. We're looking for alternatives there. Having that discussion on how those dollars are spent there versus maybe something else is something to at least consider.
I guess, Jim, yeah, you're exactly right. Our ditches are becoming a dumping ground, and tires are another thing. Tires I always look at as more of a health issue also, because they are a place for the mosquitoes and everything else to breed. We got enough of them. We don't need any help. But the only thing that I can think of that's really going to help is if it's no cost, or at least a hidden cost to the consumers that's buying the new one. And I've always wondered why. I know it costs us money to get rid of this stuff. Why can't we convince the retail people, put an extra $10 on the cost of that new refrigerator and knock it off if they give it to you, if they bring the old one in? Something to give them an incentive to do it rather than throw it in the back of the truck and let's go out 2 miles and dump it, because it doesn't cost me anything. Same with tires and everything else. But until you get the cost out of it for the consumer, I don't see you're going to change anything.
Well, that's why we're here. We want to see if we can solve these problems, and we have to start somewhere. And the county is a responsible unit for recycling in St. Croix County. They're designated that way, and we want to work with you and see if there's any possibilities and get everybody together. You throw ideas out there, and that somebody didn't think about. Well, somebody else throws it out there, we get the discussion going, and hopefully you can move forward and get a better solution for what's happening right now in St. Croix County. We don't want this to be a dumping ground here. We want to keep our county beautiful, and that's why we're here, because there's problems occurring right now. Like you said, you know, in your township, it happens all the time. And it happens in all the other townships in St. Croix County. So all I want to do is sit down, know myself, and maybe we get the administrators from Hudson, River Falls, and maybe some of the town chairs even. But let's see how we can work this out and move forward. And this isn't going to happen overnight, put it that way. We're asking to look at this. It might be start next year possibly, we could get something started, but it's increments, and we can work on different ways of funding it too. I know what the first story I get, if I talk to anybody, we don't have any money. Well, to me, that's not a starter. If you say you won't, that means if you say you won't, that means you're not even going to look into it. So I always say, let's find some way of doing it if there's a possibility, but let's look into it, and that's all we're asking.
I've lived in New Richmond for 23 years, and the number of projects that I heard somebody shoot down that Jim Zakowski was bringing up, they said, well, we can't do that, we don't have any money, and now you drive across New Richmond and you see probably 30 different things that we couldn't do because there wasn't any money that have Jim's fingerprints on, because we found a way to do it. There's real merit to what we're talking about. I remember asking if we could do a second clean sweep, and we figured out a way to do that within the grant. And when they doubled the price and then doubled again the price of recycling, the contractor who does the recycling for our clean sweep, our contractor, it was no longer possible to do a second clean sweep, and that was a tragic thing, in my opinion. So there's real roadblocks. And the cost of staff is a real roadblock. So really, there are some hurdles that are quite high, but I'm more than happy to help facilitate talking about this. I can't commit county staff time. It's not my place. I'm an elected official. I'd have to ask for that help.
I had a clarifying question for you guys. We're talking mostly all recycling right now, but the original request included compost site, which is really pretty different. You know, it's a refrigerator compared to a tree branch. So I just wanted to clarify the direction that you guys are looking for. Are you just talking recycling now? That's where the issue is? Because you don't want refrigerators in the ditch? Or is composting an issue also that you wanted to be looking into or considering?
I think it's a combination of both. It seems there's a possibility of doing both at a central site possibly, and that's where the discussion goes. It's discussion, and just see what we can do.
So these kind of questions have come up periodically since the county got into the recycling business and education business. And just to bring you a little up to date on where things have always been at, and they don't have to stay that way, that's up to the county board. But it has always been the county's policy that the program we do is cooperation, education, and assistance, but not providing direct services. A lot of our neighboring counties have done direct service. Polk County, Pierce County, Dunn County. They spend, you're not going to find recycling grants that cover that. It's mostly on the tax levy for the most part. It takes a lot of staff. We've all of our recycling specialists and our other staff who have been involved in recycling, they've gone and visited those other sites. They've talked to the people. This county has always said what we want to do is strongly encourage privatization, the way Dick mentioned, where things happen at a private level. Right now we offer appliance collection, and all we do is coordinate, and the actual vendor provides it and works with the towns and through us, and then the citizens pay for it directly. We have take and do a tire collection, we do appliance collection, we do an electronics collection. We don't actually do those. We coordinate them, and a vendor does them, a private vendor. There are other things that happen. You look at our website as far as composting, there are private vendors, again, that for a fee will take your yard waste. And there aren't tons of them. We only have 4 listed so far. I do know that local communities, some of them do offer, like the Village of Baldwin has a good composting system, for instance. And City of New Richmond did for a long time, although I understand it's no longer in business. But these are things also you can, waste management, for the most part, that company, if that's who your local municipality utilizes for the service, does provide. They pick up, in Hudson, they pick up the old Christmas trees. And that's just part of the service the city negotiated for. They also offer a compost bin where you literally can put your compost, leaves, grass, whatever, for an extra fee. Again, privatization is where this county has always directed us to go, and that's reflected in the solid waste and recycling management plan, that we go private route and we facilitate and support. We've looked into over the years what would composting cost. I don't know where our studies are. We didn't really do a study, but it didn't take very long to figure out we don't have the money, and it would cost an awful lot. It costs equipment, it costs land, it would have a lot of stuff brought in. It would also cost staffing. Otherwise, you have a lot of the wrong things mixed in, and I'm sure the city is very well aware of it, as you mentioned at the beginning of your comments. So all of that takes a lot of money, which has never been something that the previous county boards have wanted to do. In addition, we've looked at, for instance, we tried for a while, about 10, 15 years ago, to try to have household hazardous waste collection at the permanent sites that are located just across the river in Minnesota. We explored that for a good 2 years before lawyers in Minnesota said, nope, absolutely not going to allow that. We're not allowed in Wisconsin to come over, and no matter how much we pay and who pays. So that didn't work. In Minnesota, residents, there's multi-counties that go together for that, and it works really well for them, and the citizens don't pay at the time they drop things off. Instead, they all have an extra surcharge on their taxes for that. So that's how they pay for it over there. And that is not a full-time site. It's certain days of the week, and they have full-time staff there, and they take a wide variety of things. But that, again, means a bigger and bigger site. So we can certainly do what you would direct us to do, whatever it is, but we don't have a lot of staff time available for this, and we do know that it will be expensive, very expensive. So just want you to be aware of what you're looking at.
Again, I'm only asking for conversation. We're not asking for money, because usually anytime we talk, it's we don't have money, we don't have time. I mean, that's a standard thing that we always hear. So, like I say, just conversation right now. We're not asking the county to put any money in. That's all we're asking for. And I think, again, we're representing New Richmond, and like I said, we've had our conversations with other government units on this, and they might want to just go look a little bit deeper. But that's all it is conversation.
Sometimes it's worse. Sometimes they tell me they don't have time to talk about money. So, a next step. I've been down this road for years and years, and I always am frustrated because we can't do more, and I understand why we can't do more, but I find Jim and Noah's attitude really hopeful because I want to do more, and I know that I might be in the minority on this county board. Would anybody be willing to sit down? If we could, I would need your leadership in putting together some folks to talk, though.
Yeah, I think, part of the reason why we're here, we don't want to just point to a problem without being part of the solution. And so I think we're both willing to help be a part of conversations, so.
Would anybody here, as a committee, let's just look for a thumbs up kind of thing, be willing to sit down, maybe 2 of us, in a conversation, not official action, just a conversation with an ad hoc recycling and compost group, a county-wide. Ryan and Jerry, both of you? Okay.
Heather, what can we legally do without having a quorum of the subcommittee?
So two options. You can create a subcommittee under Article 4, Section 8.3 of the Rules and Bylaws. And then the committee chair, you would appoint the members, and then the county board chair would approve those members. Or without violating quorum rules, you could have two members of this committee. Without having an official subcommittee, you could have two supervisors, and that would not violate open meetings laws.
And either way, it needs to be noticed?
It needs to be noticed if it's a subcommittee, but not if it's only two county board supervisors meeting with other members, then it doesn't need to be noticed.
Let's keep it simple. And if you guys are willing to do that, stay in touch with Noah and with Jim, and then we'll report back to this committee how things are going, and if we get any solid ideas in a couple of months. Does this sound reasonable? Okay. Thank you so much. Any other questions?
Just thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and thank you all for your interest, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, it's
Yeah,
always
thank
good.
you. We might bring some other administrators into this too, just for more conversation, see if there really is, people in other communities really want to see this happen. So I guess the more the merrier.
Well, we've got time if they've got money.
Wait, I've heard that before.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. That's from New Richmond, our premier city of St. Croix County. All right, moving on. We're going to talk about Chapter 18, floodplain, proposed map and amendment. That would be Brett and Nicole.
Thank
Nicole,
you, Mr.
introduce
Chair.
yourself, please.
Yeah, I was going to. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Nicole Peterson. I'm a new planner here at St. Croix County, and it's nice to be here this evening to introduce this item to you. Specifically, it's a Chapter 18 floodplain ordinance amendment, and this is in response to the Wisconsin DNR notifications to add 2 reports regarding 2 dams that are in St. Croix County. And I'm just going to scroll to the location map. One of them is located, it's the Little Falls Dam on the Willow River in the town of Hudson. And the other one is on the, sorry, Julie. One more. There we go. The other one is the Riverdale Dam, located on the Apple River in the town of Star Prairie. And in accordance with state statute, staff has drafted an amendment to the St. Croix County Code, Section 18.130B, official maps, that lists the 2 reports, and that's found on page 52 of your packet, 52 and 53. At the top here, this is the 2 reports of the dam failure analysis for each of those 2 dams. And this evening, we're requesting, this is basically just an introduction to bring this item to you, and we're hoping to request for the public hearing at your next meeting on April 20th. And staff has provided, of course, maps of the analysis in your packet. And also the 2 notices from the DNR. And with that, I'll take any questions. I was asked to keep it short. Otherwise, we will see you on April 20th.
That was good and short. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That'll be good. We'll have questions next month.
Exactly. Thank you.
All right, next up is a report on rural road naming and addressing. Right, Brett Boudreau and Alan Denzer.
All right. Good evening, Chair and Committee. Just want to give you a report on our rural naming and addressing system. Provided background in tonight's packet describing the sources for our road naming and addressing system. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to read that and understand that. We began working on the rural addressing system here in 1982 when there was a movement to get away from the rural route system into named streets and addresses. There was a sort of a swell of information at that time from the county and the rural towns that we needed to improve those systems. 1993, issuance of addresses, the planning department, currently now the community development department, assigns addresses for the entire unincorporated or rural area of the St. Croix County in the road name and numbering system. And then the county and all the towns adopted the address numbering grid. And then later in 1983, 1990, the county and all the towns, with some exceptions, adopted the road naming and numbering system, meaning the road names were now numbers. Example, 60th Avenue, 70th Avenue, 80th Avenue. There were some towns that kept using road names, so we try to work cooperatively with those. Hudson, Troy, and Kinnickinnick currently use other names than just the number systems. And in some of the other towns, there were some historical roads that kept the name roads versus numbers. Below we have a diagram of the road naming system. Avenues are east and west, streets are north and south. Sometimes with the curvilinear nature of our subdivision, those directions can get a little interesting, where an east-west road will take a curve to the south and then straighten out. So those north-south segments, generally we would leave them as an avenue if the entire road is in that direction. Again, the rural naming and house numbering system has been carried out pretty cooperatively with the towns in most cases. Then the final bullet, or the second to the last bullet on the first page, unnamed public or private roads with two existing addresses that become the driveway access for a third driveway shall become a named public road according to the road naming standards, and the structures accessing the road shall be readdressed to coincide with the newly named road. And that would be, in the case of what we're discussing tonight, would be one of the policies that we were enacting when we made the address change in question. Other names may be changed for a number of other reasons, including new development, jurisdictional transfer. Again, there was new development with 4 new lots at the end of the road. There was no cul-de-sac. Other places we have changed multiple addresses. In the town of St. Joe, where the old Highway 35 went along Main Street, and then 35's transferred over to the state as that road moved, and other roads were renamed to either Main Street or Creasel Farm Road. So that's one example. We have other examples of road name changes. Then moving into some of the applicable state statutes, case law, and our county ordinances. Wisconsin Statute 5954, Public Protection and Safety, allows a county to establish a rural road naming and numbering system. Each rural road, home, business, or farm may be assigned a name or a number. They may be displayed on uniform signs posted on the rural roads and intersections. And then a rural naming and numbering system, town cooperation. It may be carried out in cooperation with the town. And then we cite 2 Wisconsin Supreme Court cases that support the county authority to implement name changes for roads, even if the town doesn't consent to the name change. And then there's also one in Marathon County that the county does have authority to establish a rural naming and numbering system. And the statutes uphold that right of the county to do that without the cooperation of the town. Town approval is not required. Our own county ordinances, we have the rural naming and addressing system began in 1985, where we administer these addresses and road names. It's been assigned to our planning division or planning department since that time. Planning and GIS mapping, we work in concert with the emergency dispatch services. So in these cases, we talk to them about address changes, the needs for fire and safety protection. We also provide all of the address data to the 911 system, addresses and street center lines, so we work very cooperatively with them and are going through a large project now to provide address center line data to the 911 system for dispatch. Major and minor rural subdivisions are reviewed and approved by the Community Development Land Use Division. So we facilitate the issuance of road numbers and names prior to construction. So as part of that platting process, we do review the road names for consistency throughout the county. Continuing on, thank you, Julie. 2004, 2005, the department updated the land division ordinance with emergency service personnel providing input. That ordinance work was implemented through Chapter 13 of our land division ordinance, specifically 13.7B road naming. We can read the policies there within land division ordinances. Then finally, a uniform addressing ordinance. So many counties in Wisconsin do have a uniform addressing ordinance adopted under Wisconsin Statutes 59, 54, which is the public protection. St. Croix County does not have such an ordinance. St. Croix County is implementing the road naming system adopted in 1980 through the land division ordinance, which does not include all addressing or road naming situations. A uniform addressing ordinance would clarify our authority and process for uniform addressing and road naming, and other ordinances from other counties have been obtained and are under review.
I guess in our public comment, I'd like to, you talked about, I believe, that this change for them happened because we went from 2 parcels to a third or more. Is that right?
Yeah, yep. There's going to be 4 additional lots at the end of the road.
So when staff reviews developments like that, is that part of the packet that goes back to them that this address is going to change in this area? Or where does that come in?
Does the packet go back to, I'm not sure if I'm
when they go for approval for the development,
okay.
and staff notices that we're going to have that address change, when
Right. The packet that goes back to the developer outlines the name for the road, but it doesn't talk about any address changes for any existing homes.
One of the, I think, things in our current policy for you guys to take into consideration is we allow private roads that only have 2 or less houses off of it that are a stub road to be named off of the main road, which is probably very similar to how these 2 houses were originally named off of 24th. And then the policy goes on to say once that 3rd lot is created, then they're going to have to be renumbered. So we're kind of setting ourselves up for this every time, though. But that might be one of the policies that we take into consideration of whether we should be allowing that to continue or we should be fixing that at the forefront.
that's kind of where I was getting at, was where is that disconnect happening? Because if the developer knows that the street is going to change, what is our policy as far as the developer goes? Are they not required, or are burdened with the address change of the people getting changed, the other two in this case?
Right.
And then how often does?
We've never done that before, made them pay for it. Many times, the situation is more along the lines of the developer it lives at one of those sites. That's very, very often how it happens. And yes, we've never actually, I shouldn't say we've never, I have no idea, but how some of these things happen, except I did contact one of the town's chairs and talked to him about this. And he said, we've always wanted it done that way, where a driveway with a couple houses was numbered off the main road, because we thought that was the best way to make sure emergency services found the person, the property. I pointed out that that's not really true anymore, because when this whole system started, there was no such thing as GIS. There was all the maps were done on paper. And and everything we provided for many years was slowly growing and be developed. I mean, it took decades to get to where they are now. We're beyond E91, and we're now to next generation 911, and it keeps changing. So now it would be really easy for us to make sure that private roads were just as well acknowledged and everything in the system. And yes. And also, I don't think, I talked to that town board chair, and I don't want to mention who it was, but I talked to that person and said, well, you could put up, because other counties do, 27th Street, private road underneath that. You know, some counties use an ESW, southeast, northwest, on their house numbers. We have never done that. Some people think it works better. I've talked to over the years, and some counties in the state think it's better, some counties think it's worse. I think it's more confusing, because then a road might change and suddenly you've got an east and it's really west. It's got the same number. So it can be better and worse, obviously. Anything can have good points and bad points. The same is true with how this has been done. Some of these, the town may have said, this is what we want, and we always try to work cooperatively, and that's how they happened. When it's a jurisdictional transfer, then it comes from the I'll use a simple example. Holton, State Highway 35, all those people in Holton and had the address off State Highway 35. The state of Wisconsin came through and rerouted State Highway 35, and they named it Main Street, Holton, and everybody had to change their address. And we have always tried to work very cooperatively with people. We send them a letter. Brett sent a letter, and we've answered questions, and we worked with the post office, but things have changed. What very unfortunately happened in this situation is the world is moving faster than we are. A normal notification that this address was going to change, and because of computers, the address change happened lickety-split. We didn't even aware of it. I talked to one of the property owners the day that apparently it happened, and I was as shocked as them. I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that it could happen that fast. None of us did when I talked to Brett later that day. And Brett then contacted the post office and asked them to change it back, which they did, and trying to recognize that we never thought it would happen, because it never used to happen before the house number, the street name got put up. These things the world is changing, and sometimes we don't notice that things happen faster than we could anticipate. Even the problem they had with deliveries companies already having the new address, I was like, what? How in the world? Because we don't notify anyone but the post office. So it's kind of mind-boggling to us. I'm sorry, but we probably should have thought of it, but we didn't. We apologize for that.
I have found out since that those delivery companies coordinate with the post office database once a week, if not more. They download new addresses and get new information.
I mean, going forward, if there's a private road that has two houses off it and like a clear opportunity or I guess there's very likely to be development off of the end of it in the future. We just maybe name it what it will be when it's not private anymore.
That is exactly what we would like to do, and is exactly why I called a particular town board chair, because Brett brought it up to me and said, hey, we got a brand-new thing happening, we'd like to avoid the exact problem we see. And so I'm still in contact with that town board chair, trying to talk him into it. Is not very amenable to the idea, so just, but I think maybe I got through, maybe not. I'm just trying, you know, we try to, again, it's all about cooperation and trying to be supportive. And we would like to change our practices. We learned an awful lot through this situation, that we need to change a few practices because we had no idea some of these things happened the way they did. Sure.
So the reasoning for the change was just because they added the 4 more dwellings on there. It's not really that you didn't have numbers for those houses? Is that right?
For the new houses, the new houses caused it to go over the 2 that were on that road. So we were treating it that way. And when we looked further to try to avoid this whole situation, there weren't any more numbers for the additional houses.
Could you not go 149A, 149B?
That has been suggested. And I have looked at it. We do have other cases like that across the county. Is that the preferred way to do it? No. But possibly with good signage at the end of the road, it could work.
So where we're at right now, though, is we're operating under Wisconsin Statute 5954. That's where the authority is for this. We have in Chapter 13 some of the language of how we do it. So what we're proposing is that an ordinance be drafted to fill out the rest of the process and make sure it's all spelled out very clearly. And one of the other things that I'm asking for in the ordinance would be an appeal process. Currently, there's no clear appeal process. I think anything that we do that's just staff administered should always have a way to appeal that to somebody. So an ordinance would actually, my recommendation anyways, would be to take it to the Public Protection Judiciary Committee as an introduce. It's going to go to the county board either way. But the reasoning that we name the roads and number the houses is not for GIS purposes. We do it for emergency services purposes. So they're the reason. The implementer is the Community Development Department because they have the GIS people with the technical skill to do so. So it's a partnership between the two committees. But at this point, we're really looking for a recommendation to move forward, send it to Public Protection Judiciary to have an ordinance drafted.
And just to follow up what Ken said, so 5954, the title of that is Public Protection and Safety. So the road numbering falls under that section of the statute, which is why we're recommending that the ordinance go before Public Protection.
I agree, we have to do something about it, but for these poor folk here who are stuck with big bills just to get their life back in order, could we not fix it for the next people? I think that, for instance, the person who's developing those 4 lots, if we can't do it any other way, he ought to be the one responsible to pay their bills. The change for the change. I think that's, he's the only one in this situation that's going to make money on this. And so therefore that's the least that should be done. The other thing would be A's and B's and C's and D's and E's or whatever. Just about any apartment house, that's how they're numbered. So postal systems are not opposed to that. I just think, and going onward from here, we ought to go with what we were talking about, change that road thing. But in this case, rather than making these poor folk have to put up with the added expense, I think one of those 2 options would be the way.
All right, we have two questions in front of us that are appropriate on this agenda item. And I think we need to answer both of these questions here. One is, we need to make a motion to ask staff to put together an ordinance. Is that correct? And then two, we need to have a conversation between ourselves, what we might be able to do for the Ericksons and the Toomeys. And we need to have an honest conversation about that. That's what they've asked us to do, and I want to do that. Okay, so let's have a motion regarding that.
I'll make a motion that staff create a ordinance and bring to public protection.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Same sign.
Now,
Motion-
your second part, though,
Motion passes.
so there's no, so there's no current process to do anything other than what the state law. Okay. Sorry to jump ahead of you.
Yep. I have a suggestion, and I'm gonna ask Heather to join this conversation for the committee and council. And this is a little unorthodox, but perhaps it'll work. I'm channeling Supervisor Fiedler here. Maybe we could have a joint committee meeting and just have an ad hoc kind of appeals process where we get the two committees together and take a look at this particular instance once and decide whether or not we're going to have a vote on it. Exactly what the Ericksons and Toomeys have asked us to do, which is to grandfather in their addresses, which is doing something that I never do, which is to second guess staff, but it's something that everybody on this committee is dying to do, to talk about. And I think we need to involve emergency management. We just can't go above their authority on that. And Heather, I'm asking for your advice.
I think you want.
Yeah. You don't have any authority to grandfather this particular case. So the ordinance is where you have the authority to create that, though. So you can grant yourself the authority to do so within the ordinance, but there is no current authority to do so. So the first step is to take the ordinance, and you can build into that ordinance any exceptions, any authority the county board may have. I was suggesting that there be an appeal process that somebody could follow, so you could take a case-by-case example. So we've rolled back their addresses, so we've delayed the impact on them. So until somebody takes out a building permit and is going to build on one of those lots, we have some time to work through this.
And we can circle back then.
Yep. So absolutely, we do need to address their issue, but you can't do it until you create an ordinance to give yourselves the ability to do it.
Exactly.
Well then. Yep, I understand that. I got that. Then,
County board would agree. The ordinance would be.
got it. I got it. All right, well then we have a direction that we need to move. Thank you for clarifying that. And Ryan?
So between these two committees of public protection and ourselves, which staff has the authority to make that initial determination? Is it public protection or community development?
Community development. So
Okay.
we're bringing the ordinance to public protection.
Right.
The draft ordinance, what we're indicating is that staff from the Community Development Department with Emergency Services would, address the naming issue, and if it's appealed, it would be appealed to this body, the Community Development Committee, or the Board of Adjustment.
I think if it listed as public protection now.
I thought I changed it, but the plan, I think, is that,
Somebody.
yes. But if there needs to be a joint committee meetings, that could be something that could be within the ordinance. If that is what the county board determines is
I'd
the best
consider
way
that
to.
because I'd want to have emergency services consider any appeal, because that would be my first question is, how does this impact emergency services calls? Right?
Yeah, I agree. I think if we're going to have an appeal process, then it's going to have to be a joint committee situation.
Okay.
Any other thoughts or comments in this conversation? All right. At this point, I'm going to thank both the Ericksons and the Toomeys for coming, for sharing your thoughts and opening up a public conversation on this. We're going to move on to the next business item without any other objections, and that would be to ask for a financial report for February.
The financial report is in the packet. This is through the month of February. We're still fairly early on in the year, so you can see what the totals are so far. Also, we've pretty much finalized now the 2022 numbers. We are still missing a couple of revenues, namely within, I think, parks. Yep. And then in the, I think, which was it, planning and zoning or?
Resource management got in
Resource management's the other one that's missing.
They
I
just
know.
got 57,000 in
Yeah.
yesterday.
I know one of your departments was missing some revenues.
I just meant that it just came in, so
Yeah.
there might be a little more too.
Yeah, resource, yeah. So that's what I'm looking at right now. So we're still a couple of revenues short. Parks is probably going to finish the year over budget. Pretty much everyone else will be on target, though, for their budget or very close. And then February, we're so early on in the year, I don't really have any comments yet about where we're at.
Any questions? No, good. All right, that being the case, thank you for the financial report. Announcements and correspondence.
Yep, I have a couple. So I have a couple of different announcements for you, and one, there was a public information meeting. I'm just going to pass these around, so summary of it, that was put together by Tim Stever, who is still here. So if you can't really ask questions, it's not an agenda item, but I wanted to let you know. So this is a little summary of a DNR public information meeting that was held on the special well casing depth area and for the towns of Hudson and Warren on the former Junker landfill and the Norlake facility. There were over 150 people who attended in the meeting, 100 in person and about 50 online. There have been funds set aside for this situation for many, many years. It's been in existence for 25 years, and money is running out. There's enough money left to pay for one more set of, I believe that's testing, I don't know what that stands for, per home, and their DNR is applying for Superfund status in hopes of continuing to collect money that might be able to help, but mostly to dispose of the leachate costs. So just, this is an FYI, and on the bottom of the page, you'll see there's a website for the DNR, and if you would like more information on that, you can certainly go to that website. So again, just an announcement. And then the other announcement I have is that there have been efforts for a number of years to remove two dams on the, I have one for each, yeah, to remove two dams on the lower Kinnickinnic River, and that has in the city of River Falls, and that has recently got some national attention and a $10,000 check because the local chapter of Trout Unlimited, Kiaptuish, honored one of its members, Gary Horvath, who received national recognition for his efforts as one of the lead people on removing those dams. At a March 3rd fundraising event, over 300 attendees gave Gary a standing ovation, and he was presented with the 2023 Conservation of the Year Award from Fly Fishing Magazine, which this is the article they wrote about him, which I handed out. And he also received a check for $10,000 made out to Kiaptuish, Trout Unlimited chapter, in recognition of their efforts to remove the dam. The dams are expected to be removed by 2026 to reestablish the free-flowing river from the headwaters of the springs all the way through to Kinnickinnic State Park. Mostly those two dams are in River Falls, and they will also be removing their electrical generating facility there. So it's kind of a really neat story. It's a recognition of a resident of our area. I don't know if he lives on our side of the line or in the Pierce County side, but it's a really great thing for our county and thought you guys might want to know about it. So with that, and I do have one other thing regarding future meeting dates I can do now or whenever you want.
Go ahead.
We are working on the county's comprehensive plan, and we've recently, Nicole and John are our lead people, and Brett is also closely involved, and they've recently received the results of an online and a mailed out survey on county comprehensive plan items, all the elements of it, and we want to present those results to you in April, at your April meeting. And in addition, we would like to have a workshop with this committee, and what that means is an extra meeting. And I know you're all excited about extra meetings, but we would like to have a meeting with you in May, perhaps schedule 2 if you'd prefer, and then only have 1 if only needed, to discuss any policy changes related to those survey results in the comprehensive plan. So thought we would try to get that date for a meeting on the calendars now, and we would assume that it should be a 5 to 7 p.m. to work around your work schedules and recognize that, and that it would be a couple of different dates in May. So I'd like to talk about future meeting dates for that.
Well, Who's got a suggestion? Should we look at like the 25th? Go the week after our meeting?
In May?
Yeah. Is that too late?
The 25th would be Board of Adjustment, so I believe we will have quite a few items for Board of Adjustment that month, so that would be a little harder. We'd also have to have Julie check for this room's availability, but it is better to go the end of the month because we have a lot of other committees that, in the county, that meet the first part of the month.
I was thinking go with a Thursday because that's what we usually do, is a Thursday.
Right.
We could go the 11th, but then that's early in the month. 23rd?
Ellen, did you suggest that we create two meeting times?
Yeah, I thought it would try to plan that it would only be at most, like, you can, as much long as you want. We can say an hour and then another hour, or we can do 2 hours and then perhaps cancel the second one if not needed, something like that. But get them on your calendars now, whatever you prefer.
If you're presenting this to us in April,
Mm-hmm.
could we look at one that last week of April? Or is that too soon?
Oh, Brett, what do you think? John's not here. Yeah. For that extra meeting, one of the 2 meetings.
Yeah, for the land use session at the end of April.
Yeah, work session.
27th.
Yeah, I believe from the survey results and the maps and the policies that we would provide, we could do it then.
And I don't think we have too much on Board of Adjustment that day.
April 27th?
I think it's a short meeting versus the May one's going to be a big meeting.
Correct.
Right, okay, so the 27th would work if the county board room's available.
It is.
Okay?
Dick, how do you feel about that? You might be. Not as wet as it is now. Okay.
And then, is there a possible date in May we could set tentatively? Is there any other day of the week that works for everyone? I know Scott Counter's not here, so we'll have to see what he can do. But
Yeah.
we'll,
I can make it work pretty much any time.
okay.
My employment allows me to make it work just about any time.
Well, I'm pretty flexible, but I'm being cautious of other days because of town meetings and stuff too, but I don't know what other people have commitments on. And I'm just stabbing at the dark because it's so far down the road, but we could look at,
The last week in any month, I think, is pretty open for the towns.
yeah, so I was looking at the 25th, but again, it's Board of Adjustment, so
What about the 23rd that was suggested?
Tuesday the 23rd would be okay with me.
Okay. Julie?
The room's available as well.
Okay. Yep.
5 p.m. Very good.
And the idea is to have a work session where we maybe push the tables together and provide maps and no decisions made, anything like
Could we meet
that.
in the other room for that? Would you need the whiteboard?
That's, I guess, up to, I mean, the whiteboard would be good, but we do have these here as well.
Okay, we can meet here.
This room's available, and I already did the
Then
reservation.
we'll work here. That's fine. That'll be great. All right. Request for future agenda items. Ryan, Sean, Jerry, future agenda. I have one. I would address the administrator. I would like to get, please, as we approach planning for the next fiscal budget, the Economic Development Corporation's year-end financial reports for the period 2012 to 2022, including balance sheets, income statements, and any audits. Should I say that again? Financial reports, including balance sheets, income statements, and any audits for the 10-year period 2012 to 2022. And thank you very much. Any other requests for agenda items? All right. Seeing none, date of the next meeting will be April 20th, and we will adjourn. Thanks very much.